so much for joining us tonight. It's the first event of Enterprise Week. Enterprise Week is a student-led initiative with the goal of bringing together the community and students to learn about startups and social enterprises and learn from our founders. Today we have Rachel Hanretty, who is a St. Andrews alumnus. She's the founder and CEO of Mademoiselle Macaron. And she's here with us today to speak about her journey and self-care while starting a business. If you have any questions for Rachel, please put them in the chat and we'll ask them at the end. And yeah, okay, I'll hand over to Rachel now. Thank you so much for coming and meeting with us virtually.
Oh, wow. Hi, guys. This is so exciting. I'm going to pretend that maybe we're in the Buchanan Lecture Theatre or somewhere like that. That would be lovely. Yeah, so I'm just going to share my presentation with you guys. And I think you've still got the spotlight on me for my face, my very tired face. But yeah, so my name's Rachel, and in 2012, I graduated from St. Andrews with a degree in English and French. Looking back on it, it was so much fun, but at the time it was so much work. But all I did was read books, and it was just words. It was lovely. And I started Mademoiselle Macaron because I'd spent 1 year living in Paris as part of that degree. Best year of my life, hands down. And I'd done everything I could. I was editor of the Seine. I did the radio at St. Andrews. I'd done an internship at New York Times, Paris Bureau. I'd done freelance journalism because I thought that I was going to be a famous writer. I'd lived in Paris. I'd been to the Ritz bar. I was going to be Hemingway. It was going to be awesome. And that didn't quite turn out as I expected. Despite doing everything I thought to get a full-time job as a St. Andrews graduate with a good degree and great experience, it didn't work out for me. So that's why I've called this slide "Necessity is the Mother of Invention." So why did I start up Mademoiselle Macaron? So couldn't get a full-time job, essentially. No one would give me this full-time job. It was 2012 I graduated. I was working part-time for an organisation that looked at the role of women in Scotland's economy. So that was definitely something to do with entrepreneurship then. And I kept getting knocked back. And I know a lot of you are probably going to apply for jobs after graduation. I hope I really don't scare you. I really hope that this encourages you. But I was fed up of saying, oh, you were great, but there was someone greater. So that's why I started the business. Mademoiselle Macaron believes that every Mademoiselle and Monsieur deserves a moment of luxury. And for me, that moment of luxury is symbolized in a little French macaron. I used to spend a ridiculous amount of money on food while I was living in Paris. So 2010, Paris. I'm pointing over here. I'm on the top of the Tour de Montparnasse, and I'm pointing roughly to where my 11 square meter studio is. I paid 700 euros a month for this studio that had no separate door for the toilet. It was ridiculous. And as I said, everything I was doing was to become a writer. So the photo on the right there is me. It's actually a private photo shoot of the Hemingway bar in the Ritz because I'd sold a newspaper article about this bar and they'd arranged the photo shoot for me. But like I said, necessity is the mother of invention. I had to create myself a full-time role. So having already floated the idea while I was still at uni with Bonnie, who's Saint Bonnie in my head, having come back from Paris to finish the degree, I was like, oh, I really like macarons. I could do this. I'll just enter a business competition. Why not? On a whim, completely on a whim, entered the business competition, won £250 thanks to a 20-second business pitch. And I trialed it a wee bit, but I thought, nah, I'm going to be a writer. I'll come back to the macarons if I need to. I needed to, in summary. And in 2013, I was in a flat in Edinburgh making macarons until midnight so that I could sell them at a market. So that's me. Hopefully I don't look too different 7 years ago. All the macarons I used to make at home and then sell here. I would do this every Saturday. I'd given up the part-time job because I was so committed to making macarons. And my family are like, oh my goodness, that's, what are you thinking? You're a St. Andrews graduate, you can get a well-paid job. What are you doing? Starting a business? Why are you making cakes? This doesn't make sense. And I have to explain to you now, and I had to explain it to people back then, that it wasn't actually risky. This entrepreneurship wasn't risky because there was another bigger risk, the risk of not having a full-time job, regardless of the fact that I graduated from a great university. So I carried on, and 9 months after I started selling macarons at the farmers markets in Edinburgh, I was able to open a small shop and cafe in the centre of Edinburgh. So this is the slightly larger kitchen on the left that I had graduated to, and on the right, a picture of the shop and cafe we had. So for those of you who know Edinburgh, this was near the Usher Hall and it had a view of Edinburgh Castle. It couldn't be more perfect. It was my little bit of Paris in Edinburgh. And we were growing and things were going really well, and we were picking up awards, not just for the macarons themselves, but for the overall business and for me as an entrepreneur. At this stage, so I turned 31 in August, so I think I was about, like 24, right? Something like that. So I was still pretty young and had no idea what I was doing, but I was just making it up. And turns out I needed to make up a bigger space. So in 2016, I got an additional production kitchen in Leith, not far from the shop. You can see on the left there, it's a big space, it's pretty empty, but the image on the right was from a few months ago. I'm actually sort of on top looking down. We make about 5,000 macarons a day at the moment. So that's my journey. And I just wanted to sort of knock any preconceived notions on the head, and that to be an entrepreneur, you have to be a risk taker, but sometimes the risk is not doing anything at all. So thankfully my parents are relieved, even though they thought I was crazy and ridiculous at the time. And the other thing I wanted to highlight tonight was be prepared to pivot. So we're in 2017-18. My personal life has completely fallen apart. I couldn't keep on going with the business the way I had it. So the way I had it was I had the shop and the cafe. I'd opened for online orders. E-commerce was the business. We have wholesale clients. So we were selling macarons to 5-star hotels. We had corporate contracts with brands like DR. Last week we did macarons for Kim Kardashian. That was quite cool. So we had so many plates spinning, same product, just spinning on a slightly different axis, maybe, post. And I was so broken. I couldn't do it anymore. So that's when I decided to close the shop. I bet this photo, by the way, it's just someone had a photo shoot in front of the shop and it made it look really pretty, even though it's a bit odd with that lady there. So September 2018, I took a decision after about 4 years to close our shop. We'd been told by the landlady that the rent was going to double. It just felt like it was time to close that part, to end that chapter of the business. And people thought it was failure. This guy left such a Google review saying, they closed. We were looking forward to trying them out, and when we got there, they had a sign on the window. And this Jimmy Dodge on Google, he really got me, because so many people thought they don't have a shop, they must be failing. When in fact, it was the complete opposite. When I closed the shop, my attention focused on wholesale, web orders, our sales and our profit went up, big style. Brilliant. But yeah, so this is where I want to talk about, don't let your definition of success be someone else's. So I really suffered from a bit of a PR backlash by closing the shop. That people are like, oh, are they okay? Are they not okay? And when you go into e-commerce, you're no longer an Edinburgh business. You're a countrywide business because you can send macarons everywhere. And for the next year, I was like, okay, should I open another shop? Like having a shop seemed pretty cool and definitely makes us seem legit, even though by this point we'd been around for years and we were definitely legit. But I didn't listen to my own advice. I thought, let's take an opportunity to open a kiosk at Edinburgh Airport who had approached us. And part of me was screaming, don't do it. This is a terrible idea. And the ego part of me was, do it. How cool is that? Having a place in Edinburgh Airport, do it, do it, do it. And purely because I thought that in the wider eyes of society, that would make us look more successful, I did it. And on the left there, you can see that we had this little kiosk in Edinburgh Airport. It was awful, to put it mildly. It was a terrible, terrible business. The worst decisions I've ever made. And we were ripped off by the airport. They charged us rent of £1,000 per square meter, but the numbers that they'd given us to forecast our sales were totally skewed. I think I lost £50,000 in about 8 weeks because of the investment I had to make to get that up and running. And in order to try and pivot quickly and get out of that loss-making situation, I pulled everything out of the airport, which was no easy task, by the way, because you had to clear everything by security. And I managed to find a space in Waverley Mall on the steps up from the train station to Princess Street. And we stayed there for 6 months, partly in order for us to give the retail staff their jobs, to keep them in employment, and also just to try and make money. But ultimately, I knew from the first time I'd closed the shop that bricks and mortar retail, not only did it not make enough money for us, but it hurt my head and my heart. If someone doesn't turn up to open your shop, you have to go and open the shop. Whereas if someone doesn't come to work and you have an online shop, no customer needs to know. So that was a lesson of do what you think is right for the business, not something that you think might make it look good to other people. I'll need to keep remembering this lesson. And the other thing that I wanted to talk about is something that affected me personally. It's imposter syndrome, because a business is a business, right? We're all selling something. Now, my business specializes in fancy French patisserie, which is delicious and award-winning and difficult to make at home. But the number of times I got ridiculed, or someone's like, oh, that's really cute that you have a little cake business. Oh, that's really nice. And it would drive me crazy. And I'm like, my business is still dealing with accounts, and I'm learning how employment law, and I'm doing all of this. But all the attention went to the people who have innovative technology, which is great, don't get me wrong, who were service-led businesses, who had massive clients, and yet some of them had never made a sale. And I would get frustrated at, these people you'd meet at business pitches who had wonderful ideas, which is fantastic. But when I asked them how much money they'd made, they hadn't made any money. But I have sold millions of macarons over the past 7 years. So I've really struggled with imposter syndrome, where you constantly doubt yourself, and then you have these experiences that reinforce this doubt. It's something I'm actively trying to conquer, and to feel proud that I run a solid, strong business employing 10 people, growing every year, always profitable. That one's a hard one though. So the last bit, prioritize yourself. Burnout is real. Now look, you guys who've joined us tonight and whoever watches the recording afterwards are all super smart, super awesome people. hopefully. And you're going to be capable of anything. But what you really, really need to focus on is not asking too much of yourself, okay? No one is an overnight millionaire. It, maybe one or two people are, but it's not the norm. And I, to this day, over 7 years later, really struggle with my inner critic, the inner voice that says, it's 9 o'clock at night on a Tuesday. You can keep working. Why not? Keep working. And hey, you guys probably do that to yourself right now if you're writing essays against deadlines. You're like, yeah, 9 o'clock, library, it's cool. You can't sustain that when running a business. So I hit really rock bottom a couple of times. And I had to make decisions to cut things out or to just rapidly change behavior. So I'm a massive advocate of pretty much any self-help book. You don't need to read books about accounting or economics. You do need to read books about taking care of yourself, your mindset, and being a strong leader. People say, would you not have liked to have done a master's or maybe done an MBA? And I absolutely would have, but I've lived through an MBA. And I think all this emotional stuff is the stuff you can't learn in textbooks. You will only be able to learn it when you start your business, or perhaps when you join a startup. And cut yourself some slack when it gets bumpy, because that's when the real learning happens, in my opinion. I'm conscious of the time. I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop rabbiting on and just leave my contact details. They're pretty apt there, that nevertheless she persisted. I'm still here. I'm still in business. I think I've got out of the statistic of potentially failing, right? I'm open for some questions, whatever.
Thank you so much, Rachel. It's been really great to hear. Yeah, if anyone wants to ask questions, please send them in the chat now. We also have a few prepared that we could start off with, maybe. What was the thing you enjoyed the most amongst your journey so far?
I've always said the thing I love the most about what I do is learning and developing, and no day is ever the same.
Wait, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So, so you talked about like self-help books quite a lot, and I do try to read them as well. So is there one or two in particular that you would recommend for like anything specific or just in general about life or whatever?
The first self-help book I ever read was called The Sumo Technique, and Sumo stands for Shut Up, Move On. And so one of the things in the book is the guy gets an inflatable beach ball, right? And I have this at work. I bought an inflatable beach ball, and if I hold it up in front of you, maybe I'll see the red segment and the white segment and the white segment. But for you, you might see the yellow segment and two white segments. And so you're telling me, like, Rachel, this beach ball is yellow and white. And I'm like, it says red and white. And it's all about how it depends which way you look at the beach ball. From your point of view, from your perspective, it's absolutely yellow and white. And from mine, it's red and white. And so when we have a sort of issue at work, I grab the beach ball. And it's like, I don't know what it is, but it's a moment where we're like, okay, everything is valid.
That's really interesting. That's quite fascinating. That's a really good analogy as well to give, I think. Because, of course, like we do talk about perspectives quite a lot, but presenting it in such a way, that's quite interesting. That's a book I would look into.
It's really good.
Yeah.
Rachel, one of the things that you and I talked about at a number of different points is the pains and the pleasures of employing staff. And given that it will most often take a team to bring an idea to life, I wondered if you'd give us a few hints and tips on how can you ensure that you're employing or you're working with people that are going to share kind of the way you want to do things, if that's the way to put it.
Yes, employing people is probably the hardest thing that I've learned about. So being younger when I started, I barely had any experience of being managed, let alone managing people. And so what I've learned now is you set clear expectations and outcomes, and you also depersonalize everything. So, and I don't really necessarily get this right, but we now have a board meeting once a week where we stand around a whiteboard and every department gets measured. And then if someone's saying, oh, you know, like, oh, you're just not being very nice, or like, why are you picking on me saying I don't work fast enough? It's like, well, such and such, like our target is 450 macarons per batch, and you don't reach that target, and you're the only person who doesn't. So depersonalizing is a big thing. I've also, this year, I had to fire someone and I cried so much, and he cried. He was an older guy. It was awful. And I could have kept him on. I really could have, but he was making so many errors. It was costing the business. And I had a system so that people have to check off things. And like, you checked it off and you hadn't done it. And you did that so many times that now I can't trust you. And even though I would go to the pub with this guy, I can't employ him. So I guess systems, depersonalization, and expectations. Yeah, or don't hire anyone. Yeah.
I think we have a question in the chat actually. So
Yeah.
how has your experience with the online store changed over the duration of your journey? And have you observed online consumer behavior change over time in terms of how they interact with your website, the types of orders made, etc.?
Hi, Scott. Great question. Yeah, so some of the key changes and things that we've done on the website that have contributed to our growth is making, we have this thing called the picker. You create your own box of macarons so that anyone watching a different box, and that gave us a real USP. But I would say in the last 2 years, we introduced PayPal. We didn't have PayPal before because they charge really high fees. As soon as we introduced PayPal, our conversion rate went up, and we have a very strong conversion rate of about 9.5%. So that means 9.5% of the people who come to our website end up purchasing. That I think we're very cost effective. We're actually quite cheap compared to other macaron brands. We also installed a chat bot, so someone can ask a question and we instantly reply, or as quickly as we can, we reply. I'd say it's more the back end of the website that's helped us grow. So we have a Shopify storefront, but you have a lot of apps and different websites that feed into that increase the functionality. So for example, Royal Mail integrate with Shopify. When we send your order, we click one button on the Royal Mail click and drop website, and it sends notifications to every order that's gone out that day. So if that's 100 orders, that's great. It saves us a lot of time and therefore money. As for SEO, paid SEO stuff, never done it. Don't believe in it. Sorry. I hope that wasn't rude. But Scott, if you want to do it for free, you know, for us, it might work. I liked your comment, Bonnie. Have we got any other questions?
One that occurs to me, and it follows on from Scott's kind of comment about awesome brand. Can you say a little bit about how the brand came together and the importance of brand maybe for the part it's played in your journey or the journey of the business?
Yeah, absolutely. So the brand story, there's a couple of things to point. First of all, our story is very authentic. I went to Paris, well, it's actually not the birthplace of the macaron, it's technically Italy, but no one really knows that. So I'd lived in Paris. I'd learned how to make macarons from this fancy cookery school. I had the certificate. And so people really bought into the authenticity of that. You can buy macarons from other companies, but they don't necessarily have that heritage. And then calling it Mademoiselle Macaron was kind of a way to, going forward, I would like it to be that everyone is Mademoiselle Macaron or Monsieur Macaron, that you can sit down, you get this beautiful gift box, you have that moment to yourself with maybe a cup of tea, glass of champagne, whatever. But the way the brand's, it's kind of backfired, or it's added to the strength of it, is that people think I am Mademoiselle Macaron. The sort of con of that is that when a founder becomes so linked to the brand being able to stand on its own 2 feet, well, it's less able to do that. So ultimately, I'd like to grow this to get out of it, make lots of money. That'd be lovely. And yet people also like that there's a person who still works in the business who started it. So, I mean, you give me the feedback. What do you think? You're the users of the brand.
Well, I think it's amazing. I think it's one of the strongest things. I mean, not that the macarons aren't fantastic, but I think it's one of the strongest things about the brand, because you'll always recognize it. So you'll recognize the font and the fun of it and everything. So I think it's fantastic.
I should actually add the story of the font. So the font was done by the first person I met when I arrived at St Andrews, the girl who lived in the next room along from me, Charlotte. Charlotte did the whole branding for me. She was great. I paid her for every piece of artwork, and then lo and behold, looks like we're getting more successful. We open a shop. I say, are we good about the copyright thing? And then she sends me a legal letter asking for a couple of £1,000 for copyright. And of course, our friendship died. So that was a really important lesson, actually, that even if it's a friend, or especially if it's a friend, make sure you have an agreement of the expectations of your working relationship. And that's just not something I did with Charlotte. I thought paying her and her invoicing me was enough, but not in her book, sadly.
Fair. I also have one more question. I know you've talked a lot about sort of listening to your own advice, and everyone's journey is kind of different, and so you just have to think about what's best for your business. But I was just wondering, did you ever, or do you still, did you look up to a business or anyone, or was there ever a role model of any sort for you?
I definitely obviously love La Durée. La Durée is like the mecca of macarons. However, they're owned by the same company that own Pret a Manger and some other big brands. Mm-hmm. And I found out that they make the same macarons that they make for La Durée, they make for McDonald's. So in France, McDonald's have McCafés and they have macarons, just like 2 or 3 flavors, keeping it simple. And when I learned that, I was like, oh, well, that's upsetting, but also brilliant business. So that's a family-owned company I can't actually remember the name of right now, but in my vision board, I'm going to have a meeting with the daughter of the founder. Yeah. Other role models? I don't think they have to be big people. I don't think it has to be Richard Branson. I think even Bonnie is a role model for championing entrepreneurship. Every time I see the woman, she's like, yes, entrepreneurship. I'm like, okay, Bonnie, I can do this. I'll have to think more about that and get back to you.
No, thank you so much. That makes sense as well. Yeah. So
that really makes me laugh and giggle, Rachel, because I remember the day that I still remember the day you did that competition where it was, if I remember correctly, it was just a rapid fire pitch competition. And one of the people on the panel happened to be a man that owns a food business in Edinburgh. And at this point with Rachel, it was an idea. It was something that she'd done, she knew how to do, she'd learned, but it was just an idea. And at the end of it, he came up to her and said, how can I order your macarons for my business?
What did I say? I was like,
I think he said, I'll get back to you.
Yes. I think that's like also a good lesson. Like, you never say no. You're just like, yes, I'll get back to you. So our biggest contract comes from Patisserie Valerie. It's not been an easy working relationship, but when they first called me last September, I think, and the guy, on the phone, he's like, can you make 15,000 macarons a week? I'm like, sure. Knowing then that our capacity was maybe at that point like 10,000 a week. We got the contract, and on Thursday we'll send out 10,100 macarons on a repeat weekly order, although it was a bit hairy over lockdown. I'll maybe save that story for another time, but there definitely was the threat of legal action over some unpaid bills. Yeah, that's the nitty gritty business, boring stuff. Are there any other? Oh, sorry.
That's okay. One of the questions I often get asked as well, before I ask that, please put your questions into chat. Emily and Sibi and I can sit here and ask Rachel questions all evening, but this is really your experience engaging with Rachel, so please feel free to ask questions in chat. I suppose one of the other things I often get asked is about setting price. And I wondered if you could say a little bit more about how you approached that, given that you have a business where it is a kind of high-end product, but you can also buy them in lots of different places, as you said.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So we have to make a minimum of 30% gross profit to cover everything. With growing the business, our pricing in the past year has changed a lot because our suppliers are changing, and our scalability. So it's now, to give you a real example, last week rather, we bought new equipment, and so we upscaled our recipe. We went from making 450 macarons per batch to 700 macarons per batch. And that took more or less the same time, Monday to Friday, the same number of people. And the labor cost went from 29 pence down to 23 pence per macaron, just because of scale. So we either need more equipment, more people, or more time when we're upscaling. But I guess in summary, to go back to the pricing, it's a really tricky one because the wholesale is different, and the trade-off there is that they have to buy a bulk amount. I don't know, we just kind of figured it out. We were just like, yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah. What I would say if you're doing a product business is that you have to cost the labor as quickly as possible. So my issue when I was growing the business is I never factored in my time because I was the founder. I was just trying to set this up. And then when it came to employing people to make the product, I hadn't even thought about how I was going to pay that person. So that's incredibly important. I've just seen Richard's question on the chat there about differentiating Mademoiselle Macaron from other businesses. So at the time when we set up the online shop, there were a few other online businesses selling macarons. 2 of them have stopped selling macarons. Our USP was really our story, like our authenticity, our story. It wasn't just like, okay, so right now we've got a new competitor called Hilton's Macarons, and they're a husband and wife team. But there's no like beyond that, like how many of you look at the About Us section when you buy from a place? it's just, oh, we're a husband and wife team who make macarons. And I'm like, I see your story and I raise you to me going to Paris, learning how to make them, seeing how French people interact with patisserie in general, and then bringing that back. And we try to sell an experience and a gift rather than just the macaron product. So we don't talk about it just as macarons, but in a moment. Our tagline is every Mademoiselle and Monsieur deserves a moment of luxury.
And Rachel, I'd add to that. I think one of the other ways you differentiate is the range of flavors that you have and the fact that you're always bringing out. So like I just noticed when I put the link up to the website, now you've got pumpkin, you know, so you're always bringing out new flavors. You have some which have that Scottish twist like Iron Brew, you know, so there's some things like that. Or maybe if, you know, like with whatever coming up, you might bring out a flavor that actually meets a particular season of the year or something.
Yeah, we've now set ourselves the challenge of bringing out 2 new flavors a month. So you have to like bring 2 in and take 2 out. And I thank you for the compliment. Yeah, I think our range is a huge extra as well.
So the hot tip if you're buying is you can make it look like a rainbow in the box if you pick colors that sort of suit the rainbow. It's one of the fun things, I think.
See, it's about the experience. Oh, this is just like an ego boost for me. Thanks. Talking about ego boosts, I would say also coming across some huge egos in staff that I've hired. Like the phrase hire slow, fire fast is probably quite true. I hired this French guy. He had a massive ego. And about 6 to 8 weeks later, his role was in sales and marketing. And I was like, sell me the product. He could not sell me a macaron. You know, I was like, give me the spiel. Come on. And he just couldn't do it. And I was like, that's it, you're out. So he did not take it very well. He thought he said that if he was female and more like me, it would have been okay. And I was like, it's nothing to do with your gender and everything to do with your ability. Oh well. Can I ask a question of the people tuning in, and yourself, Emily and Sabi, how many of you are considering starting a business, be that a product business, a service business, or anything at all, even in any ideas?
Let her know by raising your hand. You should have a little icon up at the top that looks like a little hand if you've not found it before. So click it and raise your hand if you're considering starting a business. Scott has already started a business, so yeah. So a few, great, thank you for that. You can put your hands down now. Although if you wanted to ask a question and unmute yourself, you could leave your hand up and you could unmute yourself and ask it. No, all the hands go down quickly as per usual. So if you do have any further questions for Rachel, then please remember to pop those into chat. We still have about 15 minutes or so left.
I kind of just want to like take everything in my brain and be like, there you go, have it all, because I don't want you guys to have to go through some of the down bits that I have, for sure. I would say that probably now that I'm in my 30s, I look back and kind of regret not having, having invested so much of my time and not being able to get that back. I also find it really hard after graduating that so many people were in well-paid professional jobs, and I was like, yeah, I mean, I think I was paying myself £500 a month to live off of. That was hard, but I've caught up now, so it's fine. Bought a house, it's all good. Interesting question about co-founders. I would have really liked a co-founder because it was incredibly lonely. It was so lonely. I mean, ultimately, you're only going to have a co-founder if they're there at the start. Anyone else just comes on as a additional person. Again, going back to what I said about working with the person who did the branding for me, you have to get expectations in writing at the beginning. Otherwise, you're setting yourself up for heartbreak later down the line. I am potentially looking at setting up like a share scheme. So I have a great kitchen manager who I've actually just invested in her because I've got her a personal development coach. So her skills are great. Her self-belief and confidence are not as good. So I'm like, come on, you gotta like boost you, get you nice and confident so you can lead the team. And if, depending on how the finances of the business go, if I can do a sort of end of year scheme where the staff get the benefit, I'd like to do that. But definitely, I guess, Richard, if you have a co-founder and you like them, I mean, it's like being married to them though, right? You have to really like them because you're going to be with them for a long time. And as for the question from Ellie about what was I most scared of when I was first starting, what was I most scared of? I want to say failure, but I hadn't really set out what failure was. I think for me, even if it didn't work out financially, like what's your definition of success and failure? Like success was still stopping it, but having learned from it, you know? I think I was just so like high on the possibility of having a business. I wasn't that scared. I'm still scared that someone will find me out. Like, I mean, it doesn't feel real. Like, you know, I don't feel like a grown up. I don't feel like a CEO. I'm just like making it up every day. So yeah, maybe I'm scared of being found out.
So this feeling like never really goes away then, the imposter one?
I told you I'm working on it. I'm working really hard. But yeah, maybe being present and like taking a few moments at the end of the day and just being like, wow, that's pretty cool. Like before I left work today, we had everyone in the kitchen. It was really busy, and in those moments, I'm like, wow, that is awesome that I can create this employment and have this team, and they are like my family. Sometimes they're like the family that annoys you. Yeah.
Can I ask how many people you have employed?
Like ever, or just at this moment?
At the moment.
I think it's 10. But that's like added up into full time because we've got a couple. I think we've got 4 part-timers. But we're waiting for the government's apprenticeship scheme. So it's called the Kickstarter scheme, where anyone who's on universal credit under 25, the government will pay for 25 hours a week. So we would have 3 apprentices, and we'll probably take the team to 15 people by Christmas with temporary staff. It's enough people.
And it's just another question that popped up in my head. So what are like your aims moving forward from this point?
So, you know, I said in the presentation there about defining success. I'm also working on that, because for a while it was just success was growth, right? So every year, what do you want to achieve? Just want to grow the business. Just want to increase profitability. And I have yet to set a firm target for myself with the business, apart from this one massive target where I want to sell the business for £5 million. And if we're lucky, depending on how it goes, we wouldn't be too far off our 7-figure turnover. We should be able to achieve that soon. I'm sure Bonnie and well, all of you could probably tell me the many ways to calculate the value of a business when it comes to selling it. But I need to, so the number of women-owned businesses after a £5 million turnover, it takes a nosedive. So the women appear equal to men in business up to a certain point. And so I wanted to get the turnover to £5 million to be one of those women. And then I was going to bow out. But hopefully in like 5 years, I can get it there and then sell it and then just reclaim my youth. Yeah. I would just like a long lie. I would like not to worry. That would be great.
That can be a short-term goal, Rachel. So what success looks like between now and that point is having some long lies from time to time.
Yeah, I now work from home 2 days a week rather than going into the kitchen every day. So that's a big win.
And another question from Scott. What's your experience like at collaborating with suppliers?
Can you define suppliers for me? Like for us, our suppliers are with like the raw material people.
Yeah, I'm missing ingredients, and I was wondering.
Oh, that was weird to hear your voice there. Hi. Ingredients. So we just hired a procurement advisor who's our intermediary. He's now negotiating all our supplier prices. So we're taking in some ingredients by the ton. That's not something I am good at, collaborating directly with suppliers. So hence someone else doing it. In terms of collaborating with like other brands, that's something I want to do more of. But the bigger the brand, the more specific their criteria. And because we are a smaller business, like an independent, we can do whatever we want type business, I find that quite difficult. But it is definitely a way to grow in the future. In fact, has anyone worked with influencers for influencer marketing? Any thoughts on that? No. We see that as a key way to grow our e-commerce, but collaborating with influencers will be interesting, I think. Yeah, I'll let you know how that works out. As for the worst advice I've ever received, it would probably be to get a proper job. Yeah. I definitely think that the sort of advice to, you know, just be sensible now, go get a proper job. Yeah, it's not good advice. Not for me anyway, maybe for you guys. I should have maybe prepared some answers to these. Yeah, Ellie, if I think of any other really bad advice, I will let you know. I mean, some silly good advice was that when I opened the shop, I was happily single, and I kind of like dated some like there was one guy who was really tall, and I dated him for a bit so he could fix the lights that were really tall and high up in the shop. Then there was like one guy I went on a few dates with who was he was a website guy. He helped, you know, just very resourceful way to date. Any other random questions? I will try not and include the dating history, sorry.
Rachel, I don't have a lot of experience working with influencers, obviously, but I do watch quite a lot of YouTubers, so I see a lot of people who are kind of like in that space, if you like. And so from that side of things, I would encourage you to think about finding people who are perhaps maybe smaller, so who still have some room to grow, but obviously who share your values. Because to me, there's a real, you said there's some people that you just get the sense they kind of take any branding, you know, sponsor my video type thing that comes just to boost up their own paycheck. And so they don't have the authenticity that you have in your brand. And so I feel like you're going to have to find influencers who share your authenticity in their own brand or their own business, whatever that is. I think that'll be really key for you.
Yeah, that word that you use there, values, that's so important, values-based marketing for sure.
Yeah. If any occur to me, I'll let you know. I watch a few
Thank you.
YouTube influencers, but not in the food arena. So
Well, now that you've done this, your computer's probably listened and is about to throw a whole bunch of food stuff at you.
absolutely, or at you maybe.
True. The theaters for influencer marketing, like stage theaters or cinema theaters?
Yeah, I was thinking like stage theaters because I liked how the brand you were saying the tagline is everyone deserves a moment of luxury. So maybe if you look at like cultural institutions where they're targeting people that are in a similar branding means, just an idea.
Yeah, no, yeah, you've got me thinking. I do find that some institutions like the Institut Français, they are not so good at marketing. It makes me sad sometimes when you come into contact with big brands or very old, well-recognized brands who don't have someone leading their marketing who knows what they're doing. That makes me sad. Scott, what's your business?
I make software for the educational market. So that's unfortunately it's not edible, which I'm very upset about because it's not enjoyable.
But you're not going to gain weight by eating your own product. It's like gaining weight and losing money. It's terrible.
I would like to have a factory though. What was your experience like, kind of transitioning the recipes from the smaller production to the larger one?
That was quite hard, and our hardest recipe to crack is vegan macarons. That's the worst bit. With the upsizing of the recipes, it's not so much the method, but the quantity of ingredient and the type of ingredient. So for example, to make 700 macarons in one batch, we buy pasteurized egg whites in a bottle. And we use that as well as egg whites from eggs, because we found that the egg whites in the pasteurized egg whites were more stable, and there was too much variation and risk with having gallons of egg whites just from eggs. You know, if you have egg yolk in there, it gets very rubbish. Yeah. Also, I just got a kitchen manager who did a lot of this, and that was great.
Do you get to taste test your own new flavors first?
Yes, absolutely. And we have shelf life testing, so members of staff have to taste one macaron of the same flavor every day for a week, and they write their comment.
Oh, that's cool.
You can come by anytime. Anyone can on macarons.
Have you noticed more shipping to home with people during lockdown?
Yes, our when peak lockdown hit, our online sales went through the roof. It was bigger than Christmas 2019. Lockdown was brilliant for us.
Interesting.
That's why I see ourselves more as a gift business rather than a product business, because people come to us to, it's like the what's in business terms, what's it called? The problem solver bit. There's a terminology for it. I can't remember it, but I remember it from a course where we're the pain reliever. If someone needs to thank their mother-in-law, their sister's birthday, whatever, we create the solution. We offer the solution rather than market specifically that it tastes of this flavor, whatever. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
I've just seen, Bonnie, your suggestions for YouTubers. Gonna get into YouTube rabbit hole.
What's the market like in Ireland?
Terrible. We tried to open up to Ireland, didn't work. We got a Mademoiselle Macaron.ie that rerouted to the .co.uk, which had a currency widget installed, And we didn't really push it, but the problem is the Irish post is so backwards. No offense to Irish people. But they only just introduced postcodes a couple of years ago, and we did an international shipment trial a couple of weeks ago, whenever it was, using this dry ice technology. The place that received the parcel last was Ireland. The Netherlands was first, then Germany, Spain, then France, then Ireland.
I just wanted to comment too. The last time I traveled through Edinburgh Airport, I did see your area there, and it was so well designed. I was quite shocked to learn in the presentation about how the airport treated everyone. But
yeah, and that was me being polite in the presentation.
No, that's an interesting insight into the behind the scenes.
Yeah, I would say running the business and seeing how things are from like behind the curtain is always a bit sad. So, and now I stopped going through airport security and getting excited, because it was just like, I'm going through airport security, I'm going to work.
Oh, gosh.
Are there any other interesting questions? I wish we were all in the pub and we could all just have a beer or whatever. I guess I have a question for you guys. Do you think that because of everything going on and because of the change in technologies, do you think that more people, yourself and your peers, would actively consider becoming self-employed or starting a business?
If you think yes, you can raise your hand again. Your virtual hand, or your hand if you're in camera.
I think especially over the next 2 years with everything going on.
So quite almost everybody raising their hand. So quite a few people raising their hand to say, yep, they agree.
I know it was only 8 years ago that I was there, but it was still very much like Accenture, Procter and Gamble, Ernst and Young, like all those fellas. And I just wondered if their graduate recruitment will slow down.
There's not much indication of that at this time. I mean, there's obviously still a lot of uncertainty in the market, but graduate recruiters are still recruiting. I think what's changing is the way they're doing the recruitment, as well as how they're onboarding people and how they're working when they start.
I mean, I'm biased, but I think you should all just start your own businesses.
And Rachel, you probably don't remember this, but I always say I'm the advisor that your parents don't want you to talk to, because I will say exactly the same thing. That when
I don't remember that, but it is true.
But the reality is that when you're sort of just graduating from university, of course, if you have paid fees and all those kinds of things, you have got debt and you've got to pay that off. But you don't have some of the other responsibilities like a mortgage and children and a family in the main.
Yeah, I mean, people say you can start a business at any age, and that is true, but there's something wonderful that can come from naivety.
Yeah, absolutely.
So do it while you're young. I mean, I'm so tired now. There's no way I could do it at this age. I'm tired all the time.
Can I ask another question as well? How do you decide like what pace of growth you want to kind of run in terms of like whether manufacturing or sales? Like if you have some people that are telling you to run very quickly and others that want to go very slowly, how do you kind of balance those opinions?
I mean, I think that you're being very kind, Scott, in assuming that we plan a lot of stuff. We don't. A lot of our growth has been organic, and I guess the most recent example is with Patisserie Valerie. We laid out like what we thought we had to do in order to hit the necessary production requirements. and we ran it past everyone. We gave them the opportunities. I found it quite difficult that people weren't as excited or didn't have questions. Like, I'd gone to town in the detail, like, we can make this many batches, so this many macarons, and then if we get this machine, so we're going to get a piping machine, like a depositor, so no one has to hand pipe the macarons. And I guess, oh, my AirPods have died. Can you still hear me okay? All right. I mean, how do we, to go back to the original question, it was how do we manage the sort of growth? We just manage it in the moment. We've not been so good at setting up a plan and pushing it forward. I've been good at managing projects where the growth doesn't seem to happen, and then we just pull out. Like, we know very quickly at what point we needed to make money, and so that's why we pulled out of the airport so quickly, because we were so far off the mark. But I mean, my approach is always to be like quite team led and lay it out to everyone and try not be the big nasty boss. But at the end of the day, you just don't always get buy-in, because to some people it's just a job and they're never going to be as passionate as you, sadly. Anything else?
Anyone else have any questions?
I'll just type my email address in the chat for anyone who wants to be, or maybe remember something later. Here you go.
Well, if there aren't any more questions, then I guess we'll close it off for today. Thank you everyone for coming, and thank you so much, Rachel, for sharing your experience and answering our questions. It was really great. Nice meeting you.
No, it was a pleasure. Anytime anyone's in Edinburgh or whatever, just, you know, send me a message, come say hello.
I would love to do that at some point when we're kind of out and about again.
Yeah.
Next year.
Maybe.
Well, I'm going to probably love you and leave you all.
Great.
And yeah, it was wonderful. Thank you so much for inviting me. And yeah, if there's ever anything I can help with, let me know.
Appreciate it, Rachel, and thanks. It was great to catch up as well and hear the latest. And I had lost sight of how many macarons you're making a week. That's incredible. From when you were hand making them in a relatively small kitchen. So exciting.
That's why I keep the photos, like, of the beginning, middle, and end kitchen.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'll need
Brilliant.
to send a video of our machine when we get it, because that's going to be the next.
Cool. Very cool.
All right, guys. Well, it was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Take
Thank
care.
you.
Thank you.
Bye, guys. See you.